last week. Right now, it is most interesting. What if we spoke to a congressman who actually has a district that looks like a district? That would be Fred Keller of the 12th Congressional District in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is much more than Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. It is a sprawling Appalachian land with gerrymandering forever and forever, and that was fixed over the last few years into districts that actually look normal. So we talked to the normal Republican Fred Keller of the 12th Congressional District here from the New York State border on down to a small university and state college, Pennsylvania. Congressman Keller, wonderful to have you on Bloomberg Surveillance. Good morning to you. I need an update from you on the heartland of President Trump's support. What are the diehard Republicans saying in the 12th Congressional District about their guy, their president, and his actions that we've seen over the last couple of weeks on race in America?
Well, again, he's not just our president, he's the president for the entire country. And, you know, President Trump is looking at what we can do on law enforcement and making sure everybody gets equal justice. And, again, we all need to come together and make sure that everybody's voice is heard and that we get it right going forward as far as making sure there isn't anybody or any tragedies that happened like happened in Minneapolis.
Or in Atlanta here just in the last few days. Congressman Keller, the Pennsylvania State University will open for classes in late August. I believe they announced that the other day. You live in a district where I'm sure people are screaming to reopen. How do we do that safely? What is your observation of what to do in Bradford County on the New York State border? How do they reopen?
Well, again, I think the reopening plan, and we've seen it happening in many states, we can do it safely. And I think the important part to also remember is that certain businesses have been operating during the entire pandemic. They figured it out. We just need to make sure that the guidelines are put out there. They're understandable. We don't, you know, and our small businesses, the backbone of our economy, can make sure that they and their team members figure it out and get our economy open safely. And we saw what can happen in our recent job numbers.
You, sir, are in a district that I would say is staunchly Republican. I mean, Congressman Murtha was there years ago, and I understand so much of the geography's been redrawn in Pennsylvania. How much of a battleground would you suggest Pennsylvania will be from the Pittsburgh of Connor Lamb over to the relative quiet of your district onto the battlegrounds of the Philadelphia suburbs? How much of a battleground will it be?
Well, you know, if you look at what's happened, you know, Pennsylvania is always been figured in a state that's important in presidential elections. It's important in every election, but you know, there's going to be a lot of you know, a lot of attention placed in the Commonwealth, and you know, the president's policies. You know, when you look at putting trust in the American people and you know, working with them and having leadership that allows them to unleash the spirit of what's great in America with fewer regulations. And, you know, I think that people in Pennsylvania really appreciate the leadership of the president over the last 3.5 years. And, you know, when we're looking at recovering from this pandemic, you know, under his leadership, we built the greatest economy the world had ever seen. And, you know, we're looking for the great American comeback. And we think the president can make sure that the policies are in place that will unleash that spirit to make sure we get back to where we were before this pandemic hit.
Congressman, good morning from London. Everything seems very political in the U.S. at the moment. Everything seems to be party lines. Why is it so political when you talk about a health crisis or even when you talk about political and police reform?
Again, you know, it's not political with everybody. I think it's political with some groups that get a lot of attention. But when you really talk to people in the community, they want what's best, and we can get there. We just need to work together and make sure that everybody's voice is heard. So again, I know everybody talks about how political it is, and it might be from what the news is covering and, you know, some groups, but by and large, the people have the same common values, I think, that a lot of Americans have, and that's, we want to make sure that our communities are safe. We want to make sure that we have our rights and our freedoms that were given by our Creator and guaranteed in our Constitution and paid for by our veterans. So we all have those same values. I think sometimes that a lot of the, either side, whether it's, the far left or the far right, sort of, gets covered, and we don't cover all that other good stuff that happens sort of in the middle.
Congressman, one final question. Clearly, the President of the United States, his Secretary of Treasury, and I would even suggest most House Republicans need to see another tranche of stimulus. Do you agree with House Republicans there needs to be more, or do you agree with the Senate conservatives that say enough?
Well, we spent $3 trillion in the CARES Act and, a couple pieces of legislation prior to that. So what we need to do, and all that money has not been driven out, and I'll give you a case in point. Pennsylvania Treasury, they did a five-month budget. They still have $1.3 billion of the CARES money there. I think what we need to do is on the Paycheck Protection, which has been a great program. We've advocated for some flexibility on that. There's a lot of money that has not yet been driven out that's already been appropriated. I think it's a little premature to start talking about another big stimulus package without first looking at the impacts of what we've already done has happened. And again, the Paycheck Protection has been huge. The best stimulus is a job, and we need to reopen our economy safely so that people can do what they want to do and then back to work.
That is true. Fred Keller, thank you so much. He's a congressman, a Republican congressman of the 12th Congressional District of Pennsylvania, really, truly in the heartland of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania.